Hi there, folks. It's David Ostriker. June 22nd, the most daylight of the year for Shabbos today. Very sunny. As you can tell, we've moved to a different location here in Karmiel. The other side of the house, it's a little bit more shady, a little bit more comfortable. We moved our lawn furniture, so to speak, to here. And so Torah from Karmiel will now come to you from this side of the house until my wife Yelena decides we should move it to another spot. It's beautiful. It's good to be in the shade. It's Parsha CHUKAT. Parsha CHUKAT is most famous for the red cow, but as is often true with me, I'm not going to discuss the red cow today. Many others will do it in my place. First, let's take a look at its connection to the land. Today is the 9th of Tammuz, the month of Tammuz. It used to be a fast day. It was the day in which I think it's 423 before the Common Era, that the troops of Nebuchadnezzar breached the walls of ancient Jerusalem, the capital of Israel. Once and always the capital of Israel, Jerusalem. And on that day, the forces of Babylon breached the walls of Jerusalem. And 4 weeks later, on the 9th of Av, destroyed the temple and eventually took the Jews into exile by the rivers of Babylon. It was a tragic day, and it was a fast day. And it remained a fast day for a very long time, 400 years. 70 some odd years. And when the Jews returned and rebuilt the temple in their ancient capital in Jerusalem under Nehemiah and Ezra, they turned this tragic fast day of the 9th of Tammuz into a feast day. And it remained a feast day until almost 500 years later, when the Romans came and sacked the city, and again on the 9th of Av, destroyed the second temple. And at that point, the breach of the walls was on the 17th of Tammuz, which became a fast day and remains a fast day today. Hopefully it will be a feast day, if not this year, next year. And so will be Tisha B'Av with the rebuilt temple. On that note, which I'm going to come to again in future weeks as we come closer to Tisha B'Av, I have a strong feeling that although Tisha B'Av is tremendously tragic today and combines so many tragedies that it's hard to bear, at the same time, 2,000 years of exile from our homeland, 2,000 years of no sovereignty, 2,000 years of no nationhood, per se, is over. Now, we don't have a temple. Mashiach is not evident in our presence, although certainly many signs of the times and days of Mashiach are with us. It seems clear to me that we should temper our mourning with gratitude at this time of the year, that we have back what we have and that we're so much closer to the goal of creation. But I want to move on now. We might come back to this if we have time, but this day is very connected to the land of Israel. And before I go to the Midbar and Parsha CHUKAT, I really wanted to make clear the significance of the 9th of Tammuz and both the tragedy of it and the hope that it was once a fast day and then became a feast day. And this should be true of the 9th of Av when that time comes as well. It's a lesson from it. Let's talk about CHUKAT, not about the red cow, which is a fascinating piece, but maybe we'll save it for next year. I want to talk about Moshe's family. I want to talk about Moshe's personality. So much time is devoted to Moshe the prophet that we have fewer insights than we might have thought into Moshe the person, the father, the brother, the husband. There are elements that we're told about it. But this week's Parsha has, some say, the reason why Moshe did not lead the Jews into the land of Israel. He hit the rock. We all know the story. The Jews complained, no water. Moshe got angry, and instead of speaking to the rock, he hit the rock, and because he hit the rock, God said, you're not the right person to bring them into the land, and so he died in the Midbar. It's a very simplistic element of it. There are many places in what I just said that you could disagree with, and you would be in the company of great Talmidei Chachamim, why Moshe didn't enter the land. But it's very, very important to see something here. It's uncharacteristic of Moshe to become angry and curse the Jewish people. He is, as we know, famous for being the defender of the Jewish people with God, when God is angry with them. What happened here? Well, you have to read everything in context. We learn in this Parsha that Miriam died. And right after that, the people complain there's no water. Well, I mean, I have to tell you, when you're in a desert, one should not be surprised that there's no water. And if one is a leader of the people in the desert, one should not be surprised that the people complain when there's no water. And it wasn't the first time it happened with Moshe. He's dealt with this before, but this time he became very angry. It seems clear to me that when your eldest sibling, your sister, passes away, your nerves are going to be particularly frayed and unstable and on edge. Older sister plays a very special role in a life, partially that of a sibling and partially that of a mother, really. Miriam was no exception to this. She was an exceptional woman in all of the positive sense. She's criticized in the Torah for what? For complaining that Moshe is not being the kind of husband that she would like him to be. It's a completely legitimate concern. Moshe has a completely legitimate response. God supports Moshe's position, but clearly Miriam is not being spiteful. She has a legitimate concern. But more than that, perhaps this whole story would never have unfolded the way it did, was it not for Miriam. After all, Miriam was alive, Aaron was alive, no Moshe. And Miriam's father said, in this world, Jewish men and Jewish women should not bring more children into this world, and they should separate. And they did. Miriam was horrified by this. I think she was 6 or 7 years old. And she told her father, who was the gadol of the generation, the leader of that generation, she said, your edict is worse than Pharaoh's. Pharaoh wants to destroy the boys. You're going to destroy everybody. You can't do this. It's wrong. It's really wrong. And Amram, her father, thought about it and said, my daughter is right. And he ordered all the men to reunite. It was very good for those people who were creating weddings. The whole nation remarried at that point. And the result of it was the birth of her youngest brother, Moshe Rabbeinu. And we know the story. Miriam brought the basket to the Nile because Moshe would have been killed by the agents of Pharaoh, along with all the Jewish boys. And she followed the basket and watched it until finally Basya, the daughter of Pharaoh, went down to the Nile to bathe, maybe to go to a mikveh. And she reached her arm out and drew the basket towards her, and saw the little boy in the basket, she knew that he was a Jewish boy. And she took him to her, and she raised him, and he wouldn't nurse. And Miriam came to Batya and said, I have a woman who can wet nurse him. And of course it was his real mother, Yocheved. And so, although Moshe grew up in the palace, right, he had a Jewish mama with him the whole time. And he became what he became because of these two women. Three women, Batya, Yocheved, and certainly Miriam. And Miriam was with him every step of the way, every doubt that existed, every question that existed. She was part of the reinforcement of the will of God, of the mission that they were on. And then she died. And when she died, the water withdrew from the nation. The well of Miriam, Bear Miriam. And the people panicked. But they didn't come calling and say, Moshe, we feel for the loss of your very dear Miriam. They said, where's the water? We're going to die here. You brought us here to die. What's going to happen? And Moshe, instead of simply comforting them, God will take care of us. He has up to now. He will continue to. He lost it. He was in tremendous pain, having lost his dear sister. In some ways, really his anchor in this world. And they showed no respect for her, just for their own needs and panic. He couldn't bear it. And he may have failed the test of leadership at that moment. Or maybe not. Maybe it's what was needed. In any case, we learn from this story in our own families. You know, Moshe was a family man. He was a father. He was a husband. He was a brother. He was a son. He was also the greatest prophet of all time, but he was a man, not a god. He was mortal. Different from all of us. Tasked differently than all of us. Given gifts different from all of us. But nonetheless, a son of a man and a woman. Someone who felt pain and loss. Someone who felt the burden of leadership. We have those things in common with him. We have potentials within us that he had within himself. None of it is fulfilled yet. And it's hard to imagine what it will be like when our personal potential is fulfilled and when our national potential is fulfilled. But as I sit here in my home in Karmiel, I think how much has changed during my lifetime. A flicker in the history of our people. And how fast it's changing and how much for the good. And how each of us have an element of this burden to make all these potentials a reality. And how important the advice of our older sisters, mothers, are. You know, when Barak went to fight the enemies of Israel, he turned to his wife Devorah and he said, if you will come, I will go, but if you will not go, I will not. We are a unity as a nation. We should strengthen ourselves with that reality. Wishing you the best for Parsha CHUKAT. We should all be purified through the red cow very, very soon. Our temple should be rebuilt. Mashiach should be revealed. We should recognize all the good that is going on in our lives. The temple was destroyed. It was destroyed a second time. It was rebuilt. God willing, it will be rebuilt again soon. Wishing you Shabbat Shalom from Karmiel. we're entering into a difficult time historically, but a very hopeful time looking at the news today. David Ostriker from Karmiel, Shabbat Shalom.